Good evening. Thank you for joining us yet again on our journey through the Maccabees. As is kind of our tradition, I guess, we'll start off by kind of talking through some of the questions that I got after class. We did get 2 or 3 questions after class, actually one of them during class. So the first question that we had was pertained to having the Maccabees as high priests, right? So the question came up, Jonathan got appointed as the high priest. Was he eligible to be a high priest, right? Was he a Levite? And the short answer is yes. We believe that Mattathias was in fact a Levite. He was a priest, and there's no reason to think that he wasn't. Most traditions have him going through the lineage of Phineas. The long answer is that that's debated, as most things are in these kinds of scholarly discussions. And you could write a dissertation about that if you would like. And I encourage anybody to go and do your own research on that. But it got real dense, real thick, and I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole too far. But the short answer is yes. The next question that we had, Johnny asked me, and so of course he's not in right now, but you all can inform him later. His question was, where was the lineage of Jesus during this time, right? So we know that a lot of the major events as you go through the Old Testament likely goes through Jesus' lineage, right? A lot of the main stories that we have, right? He goes through Jacob, and we know that he comes from Judah, and the stories of some of the women in the Bible that we learn about, and of course coming through David. So where is Jesus's lineage in this time? And I just couldn't find any information about this. You can look in the genealogies in both Matthew and Luke. There is a Mattathias that's mentioned in Luke, but it's a son of Amos rather than the Mattathias of the Maccabees, who was a son of John, so not the same Mattathias. Also, right, so whenever you compare the genealogies, Luke goes through Mary's line, and Matthew goes through Joseph's line. So they're both in the line of Judah, whereas we just talked about the Hasmoneans were Levites, so they wouldn't have necessarily, the Hasmoneans would not have been in the lineage of Jesus, but it's conceivable that maybe John the Baptist was a Levite, right? So, there may be some connection there, but of course that is all just kind of speculation, right? The Bible doesn't give his anything beyond just that he's a Levite. It doesn't even give his clan. So, there's not really a whole lot of information to go off of for that. So, I'm sorry I wasn't able to find anything about that, but if somebody else knows something that I don't, by all means, speak up, and I'd be happy to discuss it. Quick recap of where we left off last week. I put the kings up on the board here. Some of this is a little bit confusing that I didn't address last time, but we will address it this time. And I know that it's super small, and sorry, but not sorry. It fits all on one page on your handout, so we like a lot of words in the Army, so you got it. But where we left off was, Judas, who was the kind of the hero of Second Maccabees, and also a great general who is really lauded in by the author of the First Maccabees. He died, and Jonathan took over. And Jonathan, we learned, is really more of a politician than a general, and he does a very good job of kind of playing the politics of the time, right? Whoever the major leader is of the time, he's able to use that to his advantage to gain more territory, more influence for the Jews. And whenever we left off, Demetrius the First had been defeated. He'd been killed. And, Alexander Ballas was the next in line for the kings of Syria or Asia, or the Seleucid kings. Those all mean the same thing. And Jonathan really kind of became close to Alexander. Right? He was able to really make inways with Alexander Ballas, and became a nobility, and not just a nobility, but a very high-ranking nobility. So, I know this is way back at like the second week. Mattathias was offered to be a friend of the king, right, which would be a noble title, and that was considered a big deal. And Mattathias turned it down flat. And Jonathan has since not only become a friend of the king, but became a chief friend of the king, and then became a king's kinsman. So, like, he is in the inner circle of Alexander Ballas, right? So he is really maneuvered in a different direction than the way that Judas wanted, that Judas went. And we talked about how Alexander had married the daughter of Ptolemy, right? So Ptolemy is the ruler of Egypt, and Alexander is the ruler of Syria, right? So they're considered rivals, think like England and France, right? They're always at each other, and the battleground always happens to be, the promised land, basically, right? Israel's just kind of trapped in between the two. So it's, we learned that that Jonathan was able to go to that marriage, was kind of able to establish a stronger political link with both of those sides, right? So that this was mutually beneficial. And so at that wedding, this also, is a common thing where you marry the daughter of your rival so that it solidifies your standing with them, and hopefully kind of discourages any further violences. But looking on the reference sheet, it says that Alexander Ballas married Cleopatra Tea, and that confused some people. This is not the same Cleopatra as of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. That was like 100 years later. So it's just like a common Egyptian female name, I guess. I don't know. But not the same person at all. So that was confusing for some people, and I apologize for that. So things seem to be going really well. Right, Jonathan is doing well as a politician and gaining influence for the Jews. They're getting along with the people around them, and he's kind of solidified his power. He is the high priest. He's sitting in Jerusalem. He seems to be able to have squelched a lot of the renegades and the people that kind of go against him and are not as interested in upholding the Jewish law and more interested in making them more Greek. And so things seem to, and of course, we all know that every time that things seem to be either going really well or really poorly, something happens and the tables turn, right? This has just been a roller coaster ride throughout this entire process of reading the Maccabees. And so the thing that happens this time to really shake things up is the arrival of Demetrius II, right? You see his name, Nicator, there. He's the son of Demetrius. And he arrives from Crete. He's only 14 years old at this point, right? So that's why it's taken a while, why Alexander was able to kind of rule for as long as he did without any sort of opposition from Demetrius II, mostly just because he was too young. And of course, he arrives with a guy named Lasthenes, who is kind of the leader of some mercenaries from Crete, and that comprises his army. And I don't know how much you're familiar with the reputation of the Cretans, but it's not good, right? They are kind of known to be just deceitful, underhanded, despicable people is kind of the reputation of the Cretans. So we don't expect great things out of Lasthenes or this army that comes from Demetrius II. But he arrives, and he just kind of assumes his role while Alexander is out. and he appoints Apollonius as being the governor of the area around Israel. And so Apollonius comes with a large army, and he camps at a port city called Ashdod later on, and in the text it refers to it as Azotus. And it's really not advantageous for Apollonius to leave the coast. He's got some cavalry that are going to do much better on the coastal plains rather than go up into the mountains where, Jerusalem and farther inland is going to be much more rocky terrain. And, also he just arrived, right? So this is kind of his base of operations. He doesn't want to stretch his logistics line too far. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why he just wants to stay on the coast. And so he baits Jonathan to come and get me, right? I've heard how y'all are just terrible people, how you've gotten beat a couple of times by Bacchides, and you guys have nothing, so you guys are too afraid to come and encounter me too. And Jonathan responds. He marches to the coast, and he captures Joppa, which is a port city, right? So it's north of Ashdod, but it's south of what's the name of the city? Antioch. So Antioch is where is kind of the capital of where Syria is kind of right now, and where Demetrius II has set up shop. And so Joppa has kind of cut Apollonius off from his king Demetrius II, who is his supporter.
Joppa where now?
Yeah, same Joppa. Yeah, it's a well-known city, and it remains a well-known city. We talk about it in Jesus' time as well. And it's important, right? Because this is the first time that the Maccabees have captured a port city, right? So this grants them a lot of influence beyond just the area between Syria and Egypt. That's not really explored very much in the text, but it is significant, right? It would it's the same way that like Russia's always looking for those warm water seaports, right? It helps them out a whole lot. It helps out the the Maccabees a whole lot too, in order to have a seaport like that, so they're open to a lot more trade, they're open to a lot more exploration, they're open to just a lot comes with that. So it's good for them. It's very advantageous for them to have Joppa. But the problem is that, of course, they're walking into a trap, right? Because that's the whole reason that Apollonius baited them down into the coast. And so he sets a trap with 1,000 cavalry to attack Jonathan from the rear. And like I said, Jonathan's not the greatest general. He walks straight into this trap, and they get punished. But the cavalry seemed content to just hang back and pelt them with arrows, kind of try to soften them up before they go in, and the troops hold their own against those arrows. And what it does is, I mentioned that both Jonathan and Simon had come down from the mountains. So Simon's force, they hold out long enough for Simon's forces to come in and rout the cavalry. And so they get scattered, and the Hasmoneans wind up winning the battle. They sack the town of Azotus, of Ashdod. They show the people no mercy there. They loot the whole thing. And Alexander is real happy about this, right? Because Jonathan has not just switched sides on him, right? And he already had a pretty strong relationship with Alexander anyway. So he names him that king's kinsman. I guess I got ahead of myself. Sorry. He gets that higher level, like you are in my inner circle now, and gives him some control of more land. So now he controls some of the regions in Philistine as well, which of course he does because he captured that seaport, and that's kind of the Philistines area. So, again, good things happening. But Demetrius II hasn't gone away, and Alexander's still there too. So it's very odd kind of relationship right now, and so eventually that's going to come to a head. But in the meantime, Ptolemy decides that this is a good opportunity for him. Ptolemy decides at this point that he wants to rule both Egypt and Syria. Right, so it's a little unclear why he changes his mind, or if he in fact changed his mind. Maybe this was his plan from the very beginning, right? So 1 Maccabees chapter 11 seems to indicate that he's jealous of the territory that Alexander has. We have some external evidence that would suggest that he had an assassination attempt, and that the person who was the trying to carry that out was a friend of Alexander's, and so he says that, oh, Alexander set up this whole thing to try to attempt to kill you, and so he's going to try to rule Syria as well. Maybe it has to do with maybe he just thinks that since Demetrius II has arrived on the scene, maybe it weakened his power enough that this would be a good time for him to attempt to make a move. But regardless of what happened, Ptolemy decides that now is the time that he's going to march up the coast. So Alexander is in Cilicia. He's putting down an uprising. It seems like the kings are forever having to do this, go off to another place to put down an uprising. And so Ptolemy takes the opportunity to march up the coast. So what he does is he goes into each of the cities, which, as far as Alexander knows, he's on good terms with Ptolemy, right? I married his daughter. We just had a big feast. We have a good relationship. You guys should welcome the king of Egypt whenever he comes up. And so the townspeople welcome him into the town. And, he has free access to each of these villages, and, also kind of deceitfully accesses these villages, and he stations a garrison of soldiers in each one and says, mine now. You guys will do what I say, not what Alexander has said. And of course, as he goes up the coast, he's got to go through that area that Jonathan now controls. Right, he had just captured Ashdod, he just captured Joppa, so those two are on the way up. And so this is another kind of one of those moments where Jonathan's political cunning comes to light, right? So he catches wind of what Ptolemy is doing. He goes to greet him, and so while Ptolemy is basically viewing the carnage of what happened from the battle with Apollonius, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't try to turn on Jonathan. He doesn't try to view Jonathan as anything but somebody who's helping him along. And he doesn't try to overcome those and station garrisons in those cities either. He just kind of holds Jonathan as an ally, and it's really a testament to how he's built that relationship so far. So he's able to stay on Ptolemy's good side, despite the fact that he has such a good relationship with Alexander, right? So that would seem to think that such an ally with Alexander would be at odds with Ptolemy. That's not the case. Jonathan is able to assuage those fears and escorts him about 200 miles up the coast through his territory. And so eventually he reaches Antioch, which I said is that main stronghold of Demetrius II. And he gets there, and he says, you guys are supporting Demetrius II. I agree with you, Demetrius. I think that you should be the rightful owner of Syria. He divorces his daughter from Alexander and gives his daughter to Demetrius II. So if some of you were confused why the chart looks like that, now we understand why that is the case. So Cleopatra wound up married to both of them in a very odd turn of events. I don't think that's legal, but when you're the king, you make the law and you say what's legal. So, okay, everybody kind of just has to roll with it. Well, Alexander hears about this, and he clearly can't have this happening, right? He's very upset, and he returns, and obviously there will be a battle that ensues. And Alexander loses the battle, right? So Ptolemy is victorious. Alexander flees. He goes to Arabia, searching for solace, and he does not receive it the way that he thought he was going to. An Arabian captures him, beheads him, and sends his head to Ptolemy in hopes of garnering some reward and favor with the guy who is now in charge. The problem with that, though, is that Ptolemy is wounded in the battle, and 3 days after the battle, Ptolemy dies. So, Demetrius II becomes the new king by default. He has no one to oppose him, and so now he's the guy. So it's a very convoluted way that Demetrius II becomes the king. He just shows up out of Crete. He shows up with an army. He gets defeated, but it doesn't matter because the other two powers that be play off of each other. They both kill each other, and so now Demetrius is the last one standing. So he's the king. And that includes his Lasthenes. He installs that guy as his chief minister. And it's pretty obvious that this guy is the real power behind the throne, right? So the text doesn't make a big deal out of that, but it becomes important in external texts and also as we continue in this story. So Jonathan is sitting there. He sees all of this going on. He's done a really good job of playing people off of each other, but he understands that, hey, the kings are weak. And right now there's a 14-year-old who just got in power. He's got a lot of other things to worry about. What can I do to take advantage of this situation? What has been a thorn in my side this entire time that I've been a king? Oh, right, that citadel. So he decides that he's going to attack and lay siege to that citadel again. Demetrius II hears about it, and he says, stop, don't attack my citadel anymore. In fact, I want to talk to you. Come meet me. And Jonathan ignores the order and continues to siege the citadel, but he goes to meet with him anyway. And this is kind of another precarious situation, right? Because he's got that history with having defeated Apollonius. He was backing Alexander rather than Demetrius I, right back whenever Alexander, Ballas, and Demetrius I were at odds. And he backed Alexander, and Demetrius I was defeated and killed. So this is Demetrius II's father, who he went against. So, it's not an all-around great situation for Jonathan from an emotional state, but, these things are handled all politically, and I don't know how emotionally attached people actually are. And whenever Jonathan goes to meet Demetrius II, they are able to broker in an alliance. And so this alliance is recorded as a letter in the text. It's actually says in the text, it says it's a copy of the letter that was written to Lasthenes. So this letter carries both the official authority of the king and also the real authority of the chief minister and the one that everybody kind of knows is in charge. So it's twofold. And this letter is going to confirm Jonathan as the high priest again. He continues to be a chief kinsman, so not the a chief friend, so not the king's kinsman anymore, but he's been demoted to still a very high-ranking noble, and in fact gives him 3 districts in Samaria. So he grows Judah's influence even more, having met with Demetrius II. So again, things seem to be going well. Demetrius II thinks that things are going so well, in fact, that he releases the local army. Okay, so all of the people who had been soldiers from the local lands, he says, I don't need you anymore. I don't want to have to pay you anymore. Go home. I've got this mercenary army under Lasthenes anyway. They do what I need them to do. I don't have any opposition to my throne. Everything seems peaceful. So The underlying, reading between the lines is this was probably orchestrated by Elasthenes because it consolidates his power even more. Right now, his own private army is the only force that's in town anymore, and so he doesn't even have to contend with local soldiers vying for authority. As the law enforcement or any sort of a martial law, right? So, the locals, however, are not happy about this, right? Because a lot of people, that was their job, that was their salary, and it looks like the king is just being cheap, that he doesn't want to pay people. So at this point, the text introduces us to a guy named Trypho. Trypho is, he's a guy who previously supported Alexander Ballas. But he has his own ambitions, and he sees that the people are grumbling. They're not too happy with things are going with Demetrius II, and he figures that he can use this to his advantage. Now, I said that he supported Alexander Ballas. He actually knows the person who is keeping Alexander's son, right? So in the same way that Demetrius I, his son, went off to Crete, Alexander's son had gone off to Arabia. And so he goes out to Arabia and spends some time with the kid and says, and basically convinces him to his way of thinking, that Demetrius II is an evil person and needs to be removed from the throne, that you are the rightful person to be on the throne, and so on and so forth. Pause. Back to Jonathan. This is how the text goes. I'm sorry, it's not me. I'm not trying to make it convoluted. This is just how it goes. We shift back to Jonathan, and he just made this alliance with Demetrius II, but he still has the citadel, and so he asks Demetrius. He says, "Look, can you get the troops out of here? Right? Like, I'm really tired of these troops being in this citadel, and it's caught. People are revolting against them. There's always fighting, and it's not worth it." So clearly, the siege from earlier, whenever he ignored Demetrius's orders to lay off the siege, didn't work. Then Demetrius says, "I tell you what. Yes, I will call them off, but I'll make you a deal. You send me troops for a while, because I have a revolt on my hands." So remember when I said that the people were unhappy with Demetrius II? They were super unhappy with him. And in fact, they were like revolting in Antioch, right? So like 100,000 people in Antioch are protesting the king, and it's getting violent. And so he gets basically sealed off in his palace. And so Jonathan says, "You know what? I'll do that." He sends him 3,000 troops who help clear out the protesters, right? Along with the Cretan mercenaries, they are able to put down the revolt. They rout the protesters basically and loot them, they do assist in saving the king's life, right? So Jonathan thinks that he's done well. He's upheld his part of the alliance, and he's just building that relationship all the better. But once Demetrius II understands that he's secure, and those troops return back to Jerusalem, he ignores Jonathan. In fact, probably treats him a little bit icily, a little standoffish, maybe even kind of hostile, and certainly does not uphold his end of the bargain. And so consequently, he loses Jonathan as an ally. So back to Trypho. He sees this revolt. He sees that the Jews are not backing Demetrius II. He knows that the people are not backing Demetrius II, and he sees this as his moment to make his move. And so he brings Alexander's son to Antioch. He calls him Antiochus VI, right? So this is the son of Alexander Ballas and Cleopatra, right? And his little general governor guy is Trypho. And so that's exactly what happens. He brings them. And all the soldiers who had been dismissed by Demetrius II rally to the cause of Antiochus VI. They are able to capture Demetrius's elephants, which are basically like the tanks of the time and are of key strategic value. And so they are able to rout the Cretan mercenaries. And Demetrius II flees. Notice I said he flees, he is not killed. So that's going to be important later. But Jonathan, ever the shrewd politician, sees that there's another king that's in power, and he goes to make his alliance with the new king, and as always is able to retain his high priesthood, and as reinstated as the king's kinsman, right? So the highest level of nobility that they have, and he also brokers that Simon is named the governor of more lands in the west, right? So they already own Samaria. They're going to own, Philistine. So basically, from Lebanon on down south, Simon is the guy who's in charge. So once again, this is expanding that Jewish control. And so things seem to be going well again. Now that he's brokered an alliance with Antiochus VI, Simon is in a place of high influence. A lot of things happen that I'm just going to run through real quick because they're not super significant to the story. They capture Gaza again but this time they leave a garrison there to make sure that people do what they're supposed to as far as the Jews are being in control there. Simon captures Beth Zur, which is a city in the south, which gives Maccabees another stronghold in the south and kind of expands them that direction as well. Jonathan winds up facing Demetrius II's former supporters. They meet in Galilee, and Jonathan starts losing at first, but he prays, and then, kind of the same cycle as Joshua, he's able to regain God on his side, and God provides him the victory. And a little side note that Jonathan decides that he wants to also renew his allegiance with Rome, right? So there was a while ago that we talked about he sent an ambassador to Rome and brokered an alliance with them. He renews that, and he also resurrects an old alliance that the Jews had with Sparta. So this is important because at this point Rome has defeated Greece, but they have not defeated Sparta. So Sparta is kind of its own independent entity and is thus kind of still an important power in the region. So it's a good idea to have them on your side as well. Demetrius II's supporters come back better than ever for round 2 against Jonathan. It's a weird kind of story that happens for this battle. Basically, Jonathan's spies learn that they're going to attack at night, and so he tells the watch to stay up at night, and whenever the army realizes that they're not going to make the surprise attack and that they've been scuppered, basically, they decide this is not going to go well for us, and so they leave their campfires up, but they all leave out of the cover of flee under cover of night, and so by the time they realize that the campfires are going down and nobody's actually in the camp anymore, it's too late. Jonathan pursues them, but they're still able to get away. They go over a river or something. So in that way, they defeat Demetrius II's supporters again. Simon is able to put down a planned revolt against Antiochus VI, again, by supporters of Demetrius II, this time in Joppa, right, because that is where Simon is the governor. So he's doing his due diligence as a governor and kind of showing that Simon is also somebody of influence in the region. And then Jonathan comes up with this plan as well, that he's going to wall off the citadel. We can't force the troops out of there. Our sieges have not worked. We can't convince the king to move his troops out of there, so we're just going to wall it off, and then we're also going to build our own garrisons in the region. So all those things, just like I said, run through really fast. But getting back to the main political happenings of the time. Trypho decides that he wants to overthrow Antiochus VI, right? This is the boy that he just set up as the king. And it's, implied that this was really his idea from the start, right? He was going to set up this kid, and then he was going to be able to overthrow him. But he was afraid to act while Jonathan was still around. He thought that Jonathan would fight against him and that it would not do well for him to do that. So he plans to meet with Jonathan and deceitfully meet him and seize him and kill him. And so he arranges a meeting, and Jonathan arrives with a really large army and completely sees through this deception. And so Trypho says, he greets him, and he's like, hey, why do you have this huge army? I was just here to grant you titles and give you gifts, and, you've been doing such a good job with all the list of things that we just went over that I wanted to reward you. So why are you coming at me with this huge army? Jonathan says, okay, you're right. He said, just come back to my city, and we'll talk about it. Just dismiss your army, okay? You can have 1,000 soldiers or so to come with you. So Jonathan says, all right. He leaves. He dismisses everybody but 3,000 soldiers. He leaves 2,000 of them there, and he has 1,000 that accompany him to the city. As soon as they walk in the city closes the gates. There's no escape, and they massacre the 1,000 people. And so it just. It doesn't go well. So once Trypho sends his army to destroy the rest of those 2,000 that were left, but they fight back and they are able to escape back to Judah. And now there's a huge conundrum in Judah because they all recognize that Jonathan is captured and he's dead, right? So that has significant influence over or impact on how the other powers in the region view them, right? Because Jonathan was the one who was the political maneuvering of all of this, right? He was the mastermind that was able to broker all of these alliances, and now Jonathan's gone. So, next time, we'll see how the Jews deal with that, and we'll see what happens with Trypho, and we'll see Simon take over as the next leader of the Maccabean revolt. So it'll be good to join you all next week. Are there any questions before that bell rings in like 30 seconds? Okay, well, if you do, just come up and ask me afterwards. And if anyone online is interested in seeing the handouts that I've been talking about, just send me an email or Ryan or somebody and get a hold of me so I can send that to you. Thank you so much.